Hi, and welcome to the Conscious Marketer podcast. And I'm Richard Taubinger, the founder of Conscious Marketer, and also joined by Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hello there.
And today we have a part two on our episode on status. And so the first episode we did was episode 68. And in part two, we're going to give you a few more ideas about how to raise your status in the market. And just a quick overview of why it's so important. When you have greater status in the market, basically you get invites to stages and to performances and summits, and you're able to put offers in the market and convert better. And you're also able to get lower ad rates because people are visiting your site and they're kind of wanting to know what you're doing. And most people don't think about status, and it's sometimes seen as a negative thing, like somebody to gain status. But if you can kind of consciously build your status, then it makes everything you do a little bit easier. And just a quick review on the last one, we talked about affiliations, we talked about case studies and results, and we talked about your education certifications that you have. In this one, we're gonna add a few more. I think we have 4 more here. Do you want to maybe start, Kylie, by giving us another way to increase your status in the market?
Absolutely. So one of my favorite types of status builders is called third-party validation. And why this is so important is if you're just starting out and you don't have thousands of followers on Instagram or, tens of thousands of people on Facebook, then you can borrow the credibility of people or institutions that your audience connects with, looks up to, believes in, things of that nature. So there was a time where I was working with an acupuncturist, and Sandra Bullock had decided that she was going to do acupuncture. So the headline was something like, why Sandra Bullock gets acupuncture every single week. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, somebody famous, some celebrity is doing this type of healing work. So maybe I should consider it too. Now, that doesn't say anything about you. It says something about your work coming from somebody who's credible, who's a celebrity. You've probably noticed over the years that most major brands have celebrity endorsements, and that is borrowing that credibility from somebody else. Now, another way that you can do it is what I used to do when I was just starting out. I could go out into the world and sing the praises of storytelling, but instead, because I didn't have that credibility or that status, I would share articles from people that did have credibility and status. So for example, I shared an article by a man named Robert McKee, who wrote a book called Story. Story is in the hands of every filmmaker in the world. His films that he's helped make are like those hits that don't follow that Hollywood formula that you're like, what's going to happen next? This is so good. It's amazing. Like things like The Green Mile, I believe, was his input and everything like that. And so I shared an article that he wrote about how brands were dumping billions of dollars of traditional advertising and moving it into brand storytelling. And so that indicates to other people, well, if the biggest brands are doing it, then I should do it too. I'm not the one saying it. I don't have that credibility, so I can't go out and say that myself. People won't listen to me, but when he says it, people listen. And so that helped me to build my credibility by leveraging his credibility.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it's really nice because you can kind of piggyback on the giants of people who are supporting your industry and what you're doing. And you can do it in a way that connects you to them, but also you're kind of promoting them, but you're promoting yourself at the same time. Now let's get into another way to build status here. And this is one of my favorite, and often people kind of, once I say it, you'll go, oh yeah, that makes such sense. But if you think of most really talented creators or people who have built a name for themselves, they have unique positioning, and often they'll have things that are associated with them. And one of the things that's often associated with them is either a method, a technique, a formula, or a system, or it will be a product name, a brand that they've created. And so obviously, if you've created your own brand, this is kind of obvious. But if you, let's say you're a teacher of something, You can name your system or formula, and there's all kinds of examples in therapy and in, for example, we used to work with Dick Schwartz. He created internal family systems, and if you get inside their network and system, you realize that they have a whole language that is theirs. They've created it, and so you can think about how to create kind of whatever your anchor program is, and also to name your system. And when you become when you name your system and you create it, what's interesting is then nobody can really compete against that because it's your own system. You've created it, right? And so like we inside Conscious Marketer, we have like the Conscious Launch Accelerator, we have our Source Mastermind, we have, and then within that, we have worksheets and things that are specific to us. So when somebody says, oh, I just did your Panama Canal sales letter, I know exactly what they're talking about. And if they're in my community, they do too. So you can kind of start to think through a multi-layer approach to naming whatever it is that you teach or whatever it is that you're offering.
I love that. And there's something in marketing called the unique mechanism. And it actually came from a beer advertising campaign like 100 years ago or something like that, where somebody toured a beer factory. It was Schlitz beer, I believe, and it was doing really poorly. It was about to go out of business, and so they hired one of the best advertisers at that time to help them turn it around. Now, what he did was he toured the facility, and there was something like a triple purification process or something to that degree, and he talked about it in the ad. Now, interestingly enough, all the beer companies did that, but he was the first person to name it, and it went from being a poorly performing company to like one of the top companies. And so that's where the term unique mechanism comes from. And essentially why this is so important is people have seen over and over again the results that you provide. Whether you're a trauma healer, they've seen trauma healers. If you're a shamanic practitioner, they've seen shamanic practitioners. If you're an acupuncturist, they've seen acupuncturists. Anything really, they've seen it before. They've seen the transformational results that you promise, but what they probably haven't seen is your system. So when people are thinking to themselves, yeah, I've seen promises of weight loss or make money or go online or, get social media followers, they've seen it before. So they're skeptical and they're even cynical at times. Buyers are always prepared to not buy. And when they see a system, they're like, oh, maybe this is different. People have seen launch programs before, but they've never seen the Conscious Launch Accelerator with, as Richard said, all of our IP, all of our processes. And so they can get excited and they can get hope when they see that unique mechanism in place, that what you're doing is different than anything they've seen before. And that is definitely a status builder. And it certainly encourages people to purchase from you.
Yeah, it's so powerful when you have it. It's great because then you can lean into your IP as well, and people will seek you out to work with you. Let's get into the next status builder, and this one is pretty apparent and is easy to do, but it requires kind of tenacity. And it's basically that you just need to post consistently. And often we attribute status and that people are doing well by how often we actually see them. And because of the algorithms of Facebook and other social media channels, Instagram, YouTube, what we fail to recognize is if we've spent a lot of time and post something, this week, 2 weeks later, it's gone. And so it kind of like slides off the feed. And for you to become relevant, you need to be in the consumer's mind. And so this is also true on email, where you need to be sending regular emails. So by sending regular emails, posting regularly, and ideally doing some videos, which is those three things are the basis of what we call a minimal viable marketing plan. You tend to be in the attention and you get visibility with those that are in your community. And then as your community grows, you stay in their attention. And when you stay in their attention, people just assume that you're more relevant. They assume that you're active and that you're doing things. You may be doing just the same amount of work as the next person next to you, but they don't know what the other person's doing because they're not visible online. And I know throughout my kind of marketing career, I would consider myself more of a, bring me in for the big win or the big launch. And as I've, I don't know, matured is the right word, but as I've got a little bit older, I've realized the power of just the daily win of sending the emails every week, of posting, and of kind of keeping in contact with the people that are in my community. And this alone is such a powerful status increaser in the market.
I love that. And I teach 4 types of content that I want to run through. If you're like, okay, that's great. What do I post? What do I make my videos about? What do I write about? And the first one is your personal story. Now, we have a lot of podcast interviews and podcast recordings between ourselves about storytelling. So I would kind of scroll through what we've promoted and what we've done and check that out. But your personal story should match what your clients are going through. You have so many stories. It doesn't have to remain locked into your origin story. Your origin story is powerful. I want you to share it. But also, it's just little stories of what's happening in your life in the here and now. And you want to always follow the transformational arc of what was life like before, what happened to change it, and what is it like now. Now, I call that a pivot story. We teach that to our high-level mastermind clients, and it's really, really powerful to follow that framework. The second one is going to be client success. Now, something I learned from a Hollywood script consultant is that when you share testimonials and success stories and case studies, you don't want to just share what I just said, which is before, what happened, and after, because people don't always believe that. You want to share also your client struggles when they signed up to work with you. What were the challenges and how did you help them overcome it? It makes it believable. It makes people feel safe to work with you and trusting to work with you. Now, the third type of content we already covered, which is third-party validation. So you can share quotes from people your clients trust and look up to that validates your work. You can share articles. You can just talk about it. And that's a really powerful thing to share online. And the fourth is what I call culturally relevant. So that is the culture of your audience and your clients, which means their shared values, their shared beliefs, what they look up to, what they subscribe to, and everything like that. So if you're a relationship coach and there's a famous wedding that just happened, then you might talk about that. Or if there's a statistic on the divorce rate, you may talk about how people can avoid being that statistic by working with you and things of that nature. So whatever the culture is of the people that are following you or that you want to follow you, you can start to discuss what is happening in their world, not necessarily the world at large, but what is happening in their world and how you can connect that to how that you can help them. So my advice to you would just be to pick one of those and start practicing and start putting it online and just see what happens. You will build a following by following that formula.
Yeah, that's such a great, it's like a mini teaching within a teaching, but the 4 types of content there, that's like so rich. And so you should never have a lack of content. And so I think when you start to bucket your content into these 4 categories, you can have an endless amount of content that you can be posting. And it's not like you're just posting content to post it. If you're continually giving value, sharing success stories, third-party validation, you're rotating between these content, people are going to say, oh, this person really knows what they're doing, Kylie, do you want to go through the next status point, which is, I believe, types of people that you serve?
Absolutely. So if you've done some work with people, you've had some clients, but you don't feel like you're as known in your field, one of the things that I truly believe in is sharing the types of people that you've worked with, because it provides this array or this spectrum that people can then see themselves in. So I may, on my sales pages or my emails, I'm going to start to list, oh, I've worked with holistic dog pet companies. I've worked with eco laundry brands. I've worked with coaches, consultants, trauma healers, shamanic practitioners, acupuncturists. And when I start to list those off, people can see themselves in it and they get excited and they're like, oh, if she's helped that many different types of people, she can probably help me. Because again, like I said, your buyers are always looking not to buy, but when you can provide a spectrum of different types of people that you've helped, they can see themselves somewhere in there. So you want to list as many as you can. And that's a really powerful strategy. Now, another way to do this would be to say, I've helped hundreds of people in 5 different countries, or I've helped thousands of people in 30 different countries, which is a truth that I had in my very first campaign. We sold to women in 30 countries. And so if you don't want to list the types of, or you don't have a long list of types of, you can talk about how many and how many countries, or in how many groups, or in how many, how many states, or whatever it may be. That shows that you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about, you've helped real people in the real world, and it helps people trust you.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'll share just another little differentiation here too is, sometimes people will come to our agency and go, yeah, of course you were successful because you worked with this huge company here, or this leading meditation teacher here, but I'm too small. So I think one of the different types of people that you want to make sure that you hit is just different levels of people that you serve. So if you can hit somebody that and help somebody that was just starting out in an industry similar to theirs, that's going to be a lot different than if you market or helped somebody that was maybe say the A-list, or at the top of their game, or the multi-author publisher or whatever. And so sometimes it's also about the level of types of people that you are serving as well, just as a further clarification there. Okay, let's get into our last status builder. I think this is number 8. And it's basically, there's a lot of different levers in this last one, but you can expand your presence on different platforms and different types of media. And so what this looks like is, if you're good at doing interviews and you've been on social media, then you might consider a podcast. And so by having your own podcast, that gives you credibility. Probably the most well-known is, creating a book. A book is kind of the ultimate calling card. And assuming you have something unique and a little bit different to say, and it can help people, I think, doing things like books. And a little less so now, but in the early days, everybody wanted to be on Oprah or one of the major talk shows. And so I guess the modern version of that might be, I think she still has some programs she does, but it could be a version where you're on somebody's stage at a talk, or it could be you're on a leading podcast here, or you're speaking at a conference, a digital conference or a virtual conference. And so all of these different places that you show up increases your status in the market.
Yeah. And if you don't want to write a whole book, there are projects that you can be a part of where you can write a chapter of a book. I know that I did that one time. It was around women in business, and they wanted to know, what's your background, what's your struggle, how did you overcome it? And their main target audience was teenagers that were trying to be entrepreneurial, that were in maybe less than privileged situations. And so that's a status builder for me to be able to share it. And what's cool about those projects is that usually the people who publish it will do a lot of media. So if you look up my name on the internet, there will be something around like #1 best-selling Amazon author, because they tried to get that book up in the charts and they were able to. So that's another thing that you can do. Another thing that you can also do if you don't want to have a podcast is to get on other people's podcasts. And you can ask the people in your immediate network, do you know a podcast that would really fit my message, fit what I have to say? Because, for example, my friend Lisa Rothstein, who's used to be a Madison Avenue copywriter, she has a lot of connections, and she recommended me to a podcast called The Business of Story. It's in the top 50 of all business podcasts, and a lot of really well-known sort of famous people in the story world have been on that podcast. She recommended me because she recommended me, that cut through the noise of me trying to pitch it myself. And I was able to get on that podcast. And again, that's a highly ranked, when you look me up on Google, if somebody did, then that would be a highly ranked in the search results, which gives me status.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we should also mention YouTube, because it's such an important search channel as well, to get on other people's YouTube channels and also to build your own YouTube channel through video. So those are 8 different ways, if you include episode 68 and this episode, to build your status. Have a think through, write down some ways that you could build your status. And then what you can do is just kind of create an organic, natural strategy to see which piece that you can add on. Normally what I like to suggest is somebody thinks about one of these pieces and adds on one a quarter, or one every 6 months. I think the tendency is to think I need to do all 8 of these all at once. And I think really for those that have the continued consistent success, what they're doing is they're just kind of working on one project at a time, or if they have a little bit more resources, they're leveraging people to work on those projects for them. So I've really enjoyed this episode on status. Kylie and I talk a lot about this because we use these levers in order to help the people we work with in our programs, like the Source and the Accelerator, and also in the agency. It's so important that those that we work with are seen as the leaders in their industry. And that's especially true if they have programs that really change lives, because when they have that increased status, it's just easier, everywhere, and they can reach out and make things happen. And they can also bring other people along with them too, and help others to do the same. Any final thoughts and words here, Kylie, for our listeners today?
I would take one single thing that you heard today and get really consistent with it. So whether it's trying to get interviewed on podcasts, whether it's creating your own channel, whether it's the social media formats that I gave you, just pick one and give yourself 15 minutes a day to practice. You will get to where you want to go if you are consistent with even just one of what we've taught you today.
I love that. I think I'm going to get a mug that says, just pick one, make a choice and go all in on that one. Just pick one. Thanks everybody for joining us here today on the Conscious Marketer podcast. It's really our pleasure to be of service to you. And all we ask is that you go to consciousmarketer.com, join our email list, get on our list there. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or some other platform, we love to serve you and give you content that can help you get your work in the world. Bye for now.